My neighbors had security cameras that were pointed on my driveway and my backyard, not their house at all. I feel like I should mention that whenever I was outside, the wife was always super strange. I thought at first she just had social anxiety, which me too girl, like no judgment. But I would be outside mowing my yard in like sweats and a sweatshirt, and she would make her son or her husband go inside anytime I was outside. One time I'm outside pulling weeds, again in sweatpants and a baggy shirt, and her husband is mowing and she screams at her husband to get off the mower and come inside. So I'm like, okay, strange, but whatever. I brush it off because could have been anything. Maybe she just made dinner, wanted them to come inside, whatever, not my business. So then one day I'm coming home from work and it's a little past 3 a.m. and I notice a red beam on their house. And I'm like, I've never seen that before. But it was dark, so I couldn't really make out what it was. The next day, I look up and it's security cameras, and the cameras look like they're pointed directly on my driveway and my backyard. So I'm telling my mom and friends about this, and they're all just acting like I'm paranoid. And honestly, I was like, okay, I probably am just being paranoid. But then friends were coming over to my house and they're like, no, Bailey, that's definitely pointed on your house. It was one of those long security cameras, so you could tell the general direction it was pointed to. And so me and my friends are brainstorming about something I could do to test this out. And I came up with the best idea. So my backyard has a 6-foot privacy fence, and I have a hot tub back there. So I should be able to go in the backyard in a bikini and feel completely comfortable. But I decided to take it one step further. I decided to mow my back lawn in the nude. So I'm on my mower and everything's bouncing. Definitely not a pretty sight. But I didn't really think anything was going to come from this. I'm just thinking, hey, I'm getting a tan and mowing my lawn. No big deal. I shit you not. The very next day, I come home to see this.
Best day ever. Yeah.
My neighbors literally put their house up for sale the next day. And if that doesn't tell you those cameras were on my house, I don't know what would. If you don't want to show, don't spy.
Story time about how I faked being pregnant for 6 months. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I'm in my late 20s and I have a really successful career. I make plenty of money, I own my own house, and I have 2 cars. But I've always failed in relationships. I had a long-term relationship in my early 20s, but I broke up with him because he just wasn't pulling his weight. I paid for our extravagant lifestyle. He would basically help me with my work and then expect me to pay him. Also, I paid the rent, I paid for the cars, and I paid for every single dinner date we ever had. We also had a joint bank account, which was a huge mistake on my part, because ultimately I was the one earning all the money. After 4 years of dating, I decided to break up with him and I told him to move out of my house. I felt free and I started dating right away. I met this guy one night and he was amazing. He complimented me all the time and made me feel really good about myself. But here's the problem, I tend to fall in love really easily. After that night, that guy and I would talk every single day. He would come over to my place and we would have dinner, but the good thing about this guy was that he had his own money and he was pretty wealthy. His family was also really well off. I totally saw myself marrying this guy, but then eventually we broke up. I found out that he was cheating on me, but also he was doing some illegal stuff in the background. I decided to forgive him for the cheating and everything, but he still wanted to break up. I mean, I was totally shocked because I was forgiving him, but he had no intention of being in a committed relationship with me. So once again, I was single. I decided not to focus on guys at all. Instead, I started going out with my friends and focusing on my career. But you know how it goes. When you're not looking for love, it just knocks on your door. Which it kind of literally happened like that. I had some friends come over and they decided to bring some other people that I didn't know. There was one guy that showed up and I knew of him because he was friends with my other friends. He was really cute and we hit it off right away. He asked me out on a date, but I kept saying no because I just didn't want to get into anything. But he really won me over with his personality and I ended up saying yes. And after our first date, I literally thought I was falling in love with him. Like, here I go again. This time I knew that if I got into a relationship with this guy, he had to marry me. So early on in the relationship, I told him that my intention was to marry him, and if his intention wasn't to marry me, then we needed to stop dating. He promised me up and down that he did want to marry me, so I stayed in the relationship. I knew that I wanted him to move in right away, which I know sounds crazy, but I was kind of desperate at this point. My goal in life was to have kids, and I just wasn't getting there. It took me about a week to convince him to move in, and he finally said yes. But he basically told me that he wanted to continue living his life the way he had been before. In other words, he wanted to continue hanging out with his friends whenever he wanted, and I said fine. I was just happy he was committing to something. Then I realized I had to get pregnant in order to tie him down. After I finally convinced him to move in, I knew that I needed to get pregnant as soon as possible. My goal in life is to be a mom, and because I had so many failed relationships, I knew that I needed to make this one work. The first 2 months of living with my boyfriend were really good, but of course I quickly wanted to get pregnant. I also knew that the only way he would marry me was if I got pregnant, so I got to work. I stopped taking the pill and I didn't tell him, which I know sounds terrible, but here's the problem: I was not getting pregnant. I was off the pill for 3 weeks and nothing happened. I got so desperate, I went to the mall and got a pregnant woman to pee on a stick, which of course came out with a positive result. I went home that night and showed my boyfriend the stick, and he was so surprised. He asked me if I was taking the pill, which I said yes, but he got really upset and told me that I probably got pregnant on purpose, which I denied. But then he said the magical words. He said, "I guess we have to get married now." I was so beyond happy, but the problem was that I really wasn't pregnant. So I started gaining weight like crazy. Anytime he left the house, I would eat tons of junk food. I would go late at night to the supermarket and buy tons of junk food. I get Doritos, chips, cookies, and cake and ice cream. I basically ate anything that was sugary. 2 months later, I had gained about 30 pounds, and it looked like I was really pregnant. But my relationship started to fall apart. My boyfriend was upset all the time, blaming me for having gotten pregnant. 6 months into my fake pregnancy, he decided to break up with me. I begged him, but he said he didn't want to be with me and that he needed to be free. That's when I dropped the whole charade and told him I wasn't pregnant. He literally blew up in my face. He actually grabbed a chair and threw it into the TV. He grabbed his stuff and ran away. Of course, he blocked me from everything, so I couldn't contact him. 3 days later, 2 of my cars had been stolen from my driveway, and part of me knew that it was him. But a week after that, he actually reached out and asked me if I wanted to try at the relationship again. But here's the thing, he doesn't have much money, so he can't live the lifestyle I was giving him. I'm pretty sure he only wants to come back because of the money, but I kind of still love him. What should I do?
I had a boyfriend that proposed to me and 2 other women all in the same week. Now, I was dating this guy for a couple years, and one day we're at a baseball game, and he asked me, "What would you say if I asked you to marry me?" So it wasn't an actual proposal, but I was like, yes, of course, yes. So this guy would go to the bars all the time, wasn't an uncommon thing. So one time he was out at the bar, and it was like a little after 3 a.m. The bars in Indiana close at 3 a.m., and I still hadn't heard from him. I'm texting him, I'm calling him, and he's not answering. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go over to his house. I go over to his house and I notice a car I've never seen before. I walk in the house to see him and a girl standing in the living room. I'm immediately suspicious, and even if I don't say anything, I think you could read it all over my face because he just grabbed my hand and took me into his bedroom and shut the door. He literally just left her out there without saying anything. And he's explaining to me it's nothing, that's just his girl best friend. But it's weird how I've never met this girl best friend, right? Funny how that works. But I'm like, okay, was she planning to stay the night? Like, what is she doing after bars? Like, it's after 3 a.m. Why is she here? And he said that she just brought him home and that she was leaving, yada, yada. And he never went out of the room to go tell her bye or to leave or anything. We literally just stayed in the room and fell asleep. And I even told him, I'm like, okay, well, you're going to tell her bye? He was like, no, she'll be fine, which, again, was so weird. But I wrote it off until this next time. So another time I'm at his house, and again, he went out to the bar with his guy friends, no big deal. And kind of like before, it's after 3 a.m., still haven't heard from him, texting him, calling him, but his iPad is blowing up. And his iPad and his iPhone were connected to iCloud, so every message he was getting on his iPhone, he was also getting on his iPad. So I'm looking through all the messages, and I find the one with his girl best friend. And I see the same day he asked me if I would marry him, he also asked his girl best friend the same question. I also found text messages with him talking to this girl he had met at the bar. He was buying her drinks and she was sending him nudes. So I am livid. When I tell him that I found all these text messages on his iPad, suddenly he replies. He's like, I'm going to be home, just calm down. I was anything but calm. Not gonna lie, I was super petty. I broke his iPad, I broke his TV, I did the most. I was done. So as I'm starting to leave, he pulls up. And I'm like, why the fuck would you ask your girl best friend to marry you the same day you asked me? And he was like, well, I'm turning 30 and I just wanted to make sure I had other options in case you said no. I'm like, you dumb motherfucker. I told you I would say yes. Like, that doesn't even make sense. The breakup has a lot more to that story, but after we did break up, I found out he asked even another girl that same week the same question.
Am I the asshole for not letting my parents into my son's life after they secretly tested his DNA? I met my wife Sonia at a restaurant where she worked as a waitress. It took me a while to finally be her boyfriend. I introduced her to my parents and they voiced out their disapproval after meeting her. My parents think that Sonia is only using me to achieve her American dream. I told them that that is racist and I am offended by their assumption. After my wife accepted my marriage proposal, we asked for both our families' blessing. Her parents were happy for us, but my parents were gutted and refused to give their blessing. Because of this, we decided to elope and only invited my brother and Sonia's best friends to be our witnesses. Long story short, now that we're 2 years married and after we welcomed our first child, my parents started to reach out to us. My kind-hearted wife didn't think twice to welcome my parents into our lives. She let them meet our baby 2 days after being discharged from the hospital. My parents visit us regularly, and one day while Dad and Mom were playing with Gareth, Mom said something along the lines of, "Aren't you the cutest baby ever? I am so glad to confirm you are indeed my grandson." She didn't know I was around because she looked startled when I said, "What is that supposed to mean?" Mom tried to change the subject, but I insisted she tell me what she's talking about. Mom sat me down and apologized first before telling me that they had Gareth's DNA tested to make sure that he was my child. I was speechless for a moment, and before I blew up from anger, I told Dad to give me my son and they better leave before I lose whatever respect I had left for them. My mom was very apologetic and said it's because they don't trust my wife and that our son looks nothing like me. I didn't argue anymore and told them to get out of my house. My wife was in the kitchen preparing for lunch and told her my parents had an emergency and that's why they left. Am I the asshole for telling my boyfriend that his daughter cannot have her own room in our house? So my boyfriend, 30 male, and I, 24 female, have been together for 2 years, and we just bought our first house together. We move in at the end of the month. My boyfriend has a 4-year-old daughter, Kate, from a previous relationship. I love Kate with all my heart. She lives with my boyfriend's ex and comes to visit us for short stays and sleepovers, more often in the summertime. Our new house is about a 30-minute drive from Kate's mom's house. It has 3 bedrooms, a master bedroom, and 2 smaller bedrooms. We are converting one of the rooms to be an office for my boyfriend and me to work from. That leaves just 1 spare bedroom. Kate was really nervous about us moving so far away, and my boyfriend has reassured her that she will still get to visit all the time, and she will have her own bedroom waiting for her whenever she wants. My issue with this is that I don't want Kate to treat the only spare bedroom as her personal bedroom. Rather, I want it to be thought of as a guest bedroom. Of course, Kate can stay there whenever she wants to. This isn't part of the debate. I want her to feel welcomed all the time, but I don't want it to be only her room. I don't want it to be filled with her toys, her clothes, so nobody else feels comfortable to sleep in there. I don't think it's fair that a room is reserved for someone who is not there 90% of the time. In addition, my boyfriend and I are planning to have a child of our own, and I want to make sure that when that happens, we will have space for them to live. I can only imagine the circus in a few years if we have to tell Kate we are taking away her room to give it to her new sibling. That is why I want to set expectations now, that Kate is always welcome, but she will only be welcomed as a guest. Now, My boyfriend thinks that I'm the one being unreasonable. He thinks that Kate needs her own room for stability, especially as she feels we are moving far away from her. He says we can keep a pull-out sofa in our office for guests to stay on and call the spare room Kate's room. I think this is absolutely ridiculous. Kate does not need her own room. She doesn't even use it often.
Most parents will send their kids to a boarding school for drug problems or behavioral issues, but my parents sent me for a different reason. If you don't know already, my stepdad was pretty abusive towards me starting at a young age. If you want to know more about that, check out my childhood playlist. And one day I just had enough of it, and I walked out of my house with nothing on me. I didn't take anything, I just walked out. So I ran away. And a little less than 2 months later, police found me a third way across the country. So my parents decided to send me to a boarding school right after they found me so that I couldn't run away, so that I had to stay somewhere. She wanted to make sure that I was safe. My mom wanted to make sure I was safe and that I couldn't run away and that I couldn't harm myself. If you're wondering how I got a third way across the country, just don't. Just don't. I don't want to talk about it. I'm sorry. It wasn't fun. And you may be thinking, instead of sending me to boarding school, why didn't my mom just kick out my stepdad? Because he was the reason why I ran away, right? Well, my stepdad is a very talented manipulator, and he convinced my mom that I was a very, very disrespectful child, that I just broke all the rules just because I wanted to, and that I was on a bunch of drugs and all of this other stuff that's just not true. And my mom unfortunately believed him and kept me in the boarding school for 1.5 years. Were things any better when I got home? Not really. My stepdad had calmed down a bit, like he wasn't yelling and hitting as much, but he was still the same person. I still felt the same vibes from him. I still saw him as my abuser. So living with him after the boarding school was just as difficult as living with him before. And I had begged and pleaded the people at the boarding school not to send me back home. And they told me that they wouldn't. They would find a different option for me to live. And they didn't do that. They just sent me home. They didn't give 2 fucks. They did not give any fucks. They just said, oh, you're done with the program? Okay, go back right into your abusive household. Because that'll make things a lot better. I don't know. Fuck.